Good morning, everybody. I got my coffee. I got my vape. Let's talk. Today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm actually tell you some stories from my life. These are things I don't talk about a whole lot. They have to do with phenomena. So let's take a good sip of coffee and let's get ready for some scary stuff. I've known as young as I can remember that I am very, very empathic. If you're not familiar with the term empathic, let me give you the definition for empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. When you're empathic, you actually can feel the emotions of somebody else. I've been able to do that as young as I can remember. It goes further than just feeling emotions. I can tell by feeling who that person is. This empathy allows me to be able to connect better with other people, but it also makes me extra sensitive to phenomena. When I was very, very, very small, I'd say probably about 3 years old, I had this little guy that I called my little play friend. As it turns out, I don't believe he was a friend. He was this little shadow-looking guy. He was all black, and a lot of time he wore one of those rimmed hats. This guy would stand in the corner of my room when I was punished, or when I was in trouble, or when I was afraid. I remember I could see him from my bed very, very clearly. Never said anything. I would talk to him sometimes, but he never said anything. I could feel that he was berating me. He was criticizing me. He was making me feel worse. I had this feeling that he actually enjoyed that. I didn't realize till just a few years ago that there is actually a phenomenon called shadow man. He fits that description exactly, except most times the shadow man is about as tall as a person. This guy was very, very small. He was probably about 4 inches tall. What the shadow man does is he feeds off of negative emotions from people. You can Google it if you want to know more about the shadow man. That was my first experience that I remember, and the only time I've ever actually seen an entity. I've never seen a ghost. I don't see things. I feel them, I will hear them, or it's just an experience, something that happens. One thing that's happened to me over and over and over again, I don't think it's anything scary. I actually feel like I'm blessed because of it. But it's kind of strange, is that I have come very close to death. When I say that, I mean I've come very close to dying about 12 times in my life. Each one of these times, something miraculous happened. I don't remember this, but when I was 2 years old, I rolled down this very tall hill and wound up hitting my head on the sidewalk below. I know it was bad enough that I got stitches, and in about 2 months when they took the stitches out, my scalp actually parted, and my mom says she could see my skull. Now that in itself would be a pretty cool event if this wasn't happening over and over again. Another time I was late for the bus stop. I guess I was probably about maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, and I was running across the street to get to the bus stop. Everybody was telling me, no, wait, stop, because I didn't look. There was actually a car coming, driving probably 30 miles an hour. I saw him in just enough time to just kind of arch my body sideways, and the car actually touched my side very, very lightly. So I was that close. If I hadn't arched my body, I would have been knocked clear across the road. I don't know if I would have died, but I definitely would have been hit by that car. And then my favorite one, when I was playing on the road with this one band, we would play on the road constantly for about 2 months, and then we would all take 2 weeks off, go our separate ways. We were very close to where the keyboardist lived, and we were all going to go home for Christmas. He lived probably about 3 hours away from the airport, and his brother was very generous enough to drive me at 1 o'clock in the morning to the airport. A blizzard came in that night, and it was snowing sideways. There was nobody else on the road, and we were driving probably about 60 or 70 miles an hour at least because we were very late. I was in the back seat. We were talking. Before I knew it, all of a sudden, we were heading backwards down the highway. We hit some black ice and spun around. This was one of those moments, which is a lot like most of these, where I actually have time to think, okay, this is it. God, if this is what you mean for me to do, I'm ready to come home right now. We hydroplaned, gosh, it felt like hours, but it was probably, I don't know, a good minute. And we wound up going off the road into a snowdrift. I couldn't even open my door on one side because there was a fence pole and a whole row of fence poles that went down for as far as I could see. On the other side was a huge hill. We went right in between. There was inches on one side, and on the other side was just enough room for the door to clear for me to be able to get out. Well, Phil, that's not all that cool. I'll tell you what, let's take a sip of coffee and let's see if I can do better. I've had a number of things that happen in my life that seem to only last a certain amount of time, maybe a few months, maybe a year, maybe 5 years. A lot of times it would happen during one period, it would stop for a while, and it would start back up. These are things that I didn't just notice myself. These were things that other people noticed. In fact, sometimes the people would notice on their own, they knew nothing about it. One of them, I went through about a year or two where every time I drove past a street light that was off, it would turn on. Quite often, I would drive past or walk past a street light and it would turn off right when I got there. I kind of dismissed this. I kind of figured that, well, I'm kind of exaggerating this in my own mind. But then other people that I would mention it to, they would start noticing it. And a couple of months later, they would mention it to me. There was a couple of times, one in particular, where people actually noticed it on their own. And they said, Phil, have you ever noticed that this happens? When I was in St. Louis playing with Ike Turner Jr., I didn't have transportation for quite a while. So the drummer would pick me up, take me to rehearsals, take me to bus call, and bring me home. About a month after he was carting me back and forth, he said, Phil, this only happens when you're in the car, but it happens every single time you're in the car. One time, he dropped me off at 4 o'clock in the morning. We had been on the road for, I guess, about 3 weeks, and we were both just dead tired. He dropped me off. I had my luggage. I had my guitar. He didn't even wait for me. He took off, and I opened the door and walked in. Well, across the street from this house that I lived in, there was a street light. And every single time when I came home in the dark, if that street light was on, it would turn off. If it was off, it would turn on. Every single time. This particular time, I got in the door, I put down my luggage and my guitar, I shut the door, and I realized, hey, that light didn't turn off. I opened the door, I looked out, and bam, it turned off just then. Another thing is I used to have this really weird effect on inanimate objects. They would actually break. They wouldn't break when I touched them or when I was using them, but they would break immediately when the next person touched it. It's kind of strange sounding, but let me tell you a story about my brother-in-law. The reason I was in St. Louis when I got with Ike Turner Jr. was because I was working garage doors with my brother-in-law, and I was living at his house with my sister, my brother-in-law, and their children. My brother-in-law was not a very superstitious person. In fact, he didn't believe in any of it, but it didn't take him long that he was a true believer. I didn't try to talk him into anything. This was all having to do with his experiences with me. This was the worst one. It didn't happen all the time, but a lot of times I would touch a tool or touch a machine or something like that, and then he would go to use it and it would break immediately. I was working in a restaurant, and that happened to me with one of these big giant freezer doors. I went in the walk-in freezer, grabbed something, came out, closed it. Someone came in right behind me and the handle broke off. Now that's not really a scary thing, but I did used to hear voices. They weren't voices in my head. They weren't voices that you hear in sounds, like if an engine is running or a fan's running. I didn't hear a dog barking or someone talking from across the block and think I heard my name. I would actually hear Phil, like somebody was standing or sitting like right next to me or in front of me or right behind me. They never yelled, but it was loud and clear. This went on for about 2.5 years. It would happen maybe 3 or 4 times a month. One time I was driving down the highway and I heard this woman's voice. It was like she was in the back seat and she was leaning up towards my seat and she said, Phil. Hearing these voices never scared me. I was very comfortable with it. This one particular time, it did startle me because I wasn't expecting it, but I never got scared. As a matter of fact, last night I was thinking about recording this and I was thinking about that incident and I was getting a little scared. I was like, man, that was a freaky thing. Let's go ahead and take another sip real quick. So now let's talk about spirits, ghosts, entities. Ooh. I've actually had quite a few experiences, some of them good, some of them not so good. And I'll tell you about them. When I was a teenager in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, we didn't really have any cabinets slamming or things moving or embodied voices or anything like that. We just had this one phenomena that happened to everybody that was just really, really strange. And that had to do with our belongings, especially if it was something that we used all the time. I would put something down and I would go to reach back for it and it wasn't there. I would search all over the house. I'd search everywhere. A lot of times it was quite a few days, maybe weeks, maybe months later after I've stopped looking for this thing, and it would turn up exactly where I left it, exactly the first and the 50th and the 1000th place that I looked. We assumed it was a poltergeist that was doing that, and it could have been. We referred to him as Charlie. My little sister actually had a dream at one point. If I can remember correctly, she was dancing with this spirit in a ballroom or something like that. And he told her that his name was not Charlie. I can't remember the name that he said, but we were calling him by the wrong name. But we still referred to him as Charlie. He was never scary. He never did anything else beside that. But as long as any of us lived in that house, this would happen all the time. Probably the experience that I could say was most definitely a ghost was when I was moving here to Nashville. I moved up here with my best friend, Taylor Ray, and she and I and her boyfriend came up here to look for a place. Got a place set up, went back to Texas, spent about 2 months to get our stuff together, and then we drove up there. Her sister flew into Dallas to drive up there with us. So it was me, Taylor, her boyfriend, and her sister. Her boyfriend and I drove the U-Haul. It had a governor on it, which would only allow us to drive 60 miles an hour. Needless to say, Taylor and her sister took off and they got to the house quite a bit before us. They actually called us on the phone and they were describing the house and how cool it was and stuff like that. And they mentioned, well, that's really strange. I know for sure I turned that light off. It was in the room that I wound up getting. They turned the light on and turned it off quite a few different times. When they'd go back, the light was back on again. Well, that was just the beginning. We started realizing that we weren't alone. My only personal experience was kind of a voice inside my head. We lived off of this long road called Gallatin Road. And we had only been as far as a Walmart, which was probably about 5 miles down in one direction. We didn't really know much else about Nashville. I did know that on the way there was a Krispy Kreme, and I'm a donut lover. The day after we got everything all unpacked, I got up way before everybody else decided I was going to get them some donuts. Well, if you've ever rented a Ryder or a U-Haul truck, if you go across country, the price includes a certain amount of mileage. We were within like 8 miles of running out of the mileage, and we didn't have a whole lot of money to spend. So one of the things that I was concerned about when I got up that morning is, how do I find a U-Haul place that's close by so I'm not going to go over the mileage? I looked in the phone book, and the closest one that I saw was about 10 miles away. So this was something that was on my mind. Go to Krispy Kreme. I got the donuts and they were hot. I got back out to Gallatin Road and I was about to take a left to go home and bring everybody all these fresh donuts. Well, I had this female voice that I heard inside my head. It was just as clear as I'm talking to you now. And what it said is, instead of taking a left, take a right, just past Walmart. On the left, there'll be a U-Haul and you can't miss it. Well, I was kind of doubting this. I was like, yeah, did I imagine that? I really need to get these donuts home because they're hot. Everybody's going to be waking up. But I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I took a right, and sure enough, just past Walmart, on the left, there was a storage company that had U-Haul trucks out in the front. Couldn't miss it, even if I tried. It turns out that this spirit was a lady, and she was actually very, very nice. She was very protective of Taylor. Taylor's mom also flew into Nashville here to help us get things set up. I let her sleep in my room because I wasn't going to make her sleep on the couch. That just wasn't nice. So I was sleeping on the couch, and I sleep with a box fan. It just helps me sleep. I remember one of the nights I was laying on the couch. I woke up and I looked, and Taylor's boyfriend was walking into the living room, picked up this little light blanket thing, balled it up, and threw it on the chair. The next day, I found out Taylor was getting really tired and her boyfriend had fallen asleep on the floor. She tried to get him to wake up and he wouldn't wake up. So she put this blanket over him so he wouldn't get cold, and she went on to bed. Just after she fell asleep, she woke up and there was this blue glowing lady standing at the foot of her bed. Taylor put her covers over her head and she said, "You got to go away. You're freaking me out." And then a couple of minutes later, Taylon's boyfriend walked into the room and was complaining that he was so cold. Taylon said, well, I covered you up with a blanket. And he said, well, I didn't have a blanket on me. He walked back in the living room and he saw that the blanket had been rolled up nice and neat and laid at the foot of the chair. That was when I woke up and I saw him pick it up and throw it. Another time, he and Taylon had a fight. He left to go to his place because he moved to Nashville as well. He looked back at her window and that little blue lady was sitting in the window just kind of watching him like, yeah, you better go. Another time, Taylon's sister felt something pull her backwards. But all in all, this was a pretty benign haunting. When I got the landlady on the phone talking about the house, she was making sure we got all set up and everything like that. I just happened to mention that, hey, why didn't you tell us that there was a haunting here? And she said, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, I've owned that house since I was 19 years old. Well, just as she was talking, her daughter walked through the room and she overheard her and she said, Mom, don't you remember about the nice lady who lived in my closet? That bedroom happened to be my bedroom. Well, all this talk about donuts makes me want some more coffee. Let's take another sip. Nashville is a very, very haunted town. It's no wonder so many people died here during the Civil War. This area was where the worst battles happened. I've heard story after story after story of hauntings all over the place. A few years back, I had about 3 women's winter coats that I bought at an estate sale. I was taking pictures of them in our living room for eBay. When I look back at the pictures of all 3 coats, there was one long wool pea coat, and there were these little circles with kind of squigglies. They looked like little globes or lights that were just in random places, different sizes. What they look like are orbs. Check out these pictures. Nobody knows what orbs actually are. They tend to be around where paranormal things happen, where you see ghost activity and things like that. Generally, they're right around something that is being haunted. So anyway, I didn't think that at first. I figured there was dust that was flying around. So I retook the pictures and there were more orbs. There were different amounts of them, different sizes, but they were in different places. I took all the pictures again and sure enough, the only one that had orbs in it was this particular coat. Let me tell you about my biggest experience with the afterlife. When I was still in Fort Walton, I started playing beach music with this couple, and we went on the road. The drummer and I joined at the same time, and we really didn't know each other that well. So we would take time after rehearsal, and we would just hang out and get to know each other. One night, they started talking about the Ouija board. They used to use the Ouija board all the time. They told us about this one entity that would get on there on a regular basis. He was a guitar player, and he kind of guided them through things. Well, the drummer and I said, you guys are full of crap. They didn't actually have a Ouija board at the time. They had stopped playing on the Ouija board a couple years before. But we talked them into getting one. We went to Walmart, went to the toy section, and sure enough, in the games, there was a Ouija board. Now, a side note, it blows my mind that Ouija boards are sold as toys because they are not toys. Anyway, we brought this back to their house and we were playing on it. And sure enough, we would sit there and that little pointer would move and it would answer questions and things like that. Well, I got up and went to the bathroom and I came back and I noticed that they were just sitting there. It wasn't moving. So I was thinking, I wonder if it's because of me that it's moving. I just kind of would touch it and it would start moving and answer questions. I would stop touching it and it would stop. So I said, guys, I know we're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to get on the Ouija board by yourself, but I want to try something. Everybody take your hands off and let me do it by myself. So let me give you a little bit of backstory. I've done a little bit of prose writing, poetry, and things like that, and I would write under the assumed name of PTG. Now, nobody there knew that. Only my mom and my sisters really knew because I hadn't been published at that point. Nobody else knew. Okay, so the minute I touched that little pointer thing, it moved and it spelled out PTG. I had this really powerful reaction and I just started bawling. This freaked the drummer out. He jumped off the floor and jumped onto the couch across the way. It just really freaked him out. Long story short, in that session, I actually spoke to a couple of different entities and one of them was this guitar player. He gave me some guidelines. He told me because I was an empath, that spirits could actually contact me easier, and that I could actually do some good with that. Because a lot of spirits are lonely, they're confused, they're scared, they don't know what's going on, and it helps to have somebody that can explain things to them. He let me know that because I was an empath as well, I would attract a lot of spirits. First of all, don't form any kind of relationship with them. Don't get on the Ouija board by myself. He explained that the spirits are exactly the same people that they were when they were alive, and that I could actually feel them and be able to recognize them. He said, don't talk to anybody that won't identify themselves, and be careful because there's some nasty stuff out there that will try to impersonate spirits that I know. And he said, definitely don't build any kind of a friendship or relationship, because then they would bond to me, they would stay with me, and they wouldn't go where they need to go. I know all that sounds kind of weird, but that's what was spelled out to me in this conversation. I started getting on the Ouija board quite a bit. It wasn't an everyday thing, but every time we would get together as a band, we would do the Ouija board. We took it out on the road with us. I realized that I could actually start doing exorcisms and things like that. One of the scariest experiences that I had was up in Ocean City. We went to this one club we'd never played before. They put us in this little house on the bay that didn't really have too many people close to us. It was pretty cool because we could go fishing on our day off. We played one day, we had a day off, and then we were supposed to play out the rest of the gig. And on our night off, the drummer and the lead singer's wife, who was also a lead singer, decided that they were getting bored and they wanted to go out. So they borrowed my car and they took off. Well, the leader and I did what we do when we didn't have anything else to do. We got out the Ouija board. Okay, that freaked me out. Google just answered me on my phone. I'm going to turn off all sound. How about that? The weird thing is that that's an extra phone that I used to take pictures for eBay, and it was sitting on a tripod next to me. It's not connected to the internet. It's not connected to the Wi-Fi. It's not activated. There's no way for Google to answer my question, but it did. Woo! I need a sip after that. Okay, let's get on with the story. So I'm in Ocean City. Half the band has gone out to try to find something to do, and the lead singer and I are sitting there on the Ouija board. I don't really remember a whole lot about who we talked to or what happened. I just remembered we got done with that session. I got up, went into the master bedroom, which is just off the kitchen where we were. As I was in the process of doing my business, I heard male and female voices talking. It was kind of like somebody turned on a TV. Didn't think anything of it. I just figured that the lead singer was watching TV. I went looking around, and he had actually gone to the other bathroom. There was no TV on. Well, when he came back out, we got back on the board, and we had this really nasty entity thing that got on there with us. Through that session, I did actually exorcise him from the house. It kind of started following me around for a little while, and I'll kind of get to that maybe a little bit later. But as I was exercising it, the windows started to shake, and then they started to shake a little bit louder. And then the refrigerator started shaking and some furniture started shaking. That was pretty freaky. If that wasn't weird enough, the lead singer and the drummer came back and the couple went to bed. This was a new drummer. It wasn't the drummer that got freaked out before, and he had never been on the Ouija board. He'd always wanted to contact, I think it was a cousin or a brother or something. So we got on the Ouija board. We actually did contact him. We stopped and talked for a little bit and just talked about the experience. And then for some reason, we decided to jump back on it again. Well, when we did, the first thing that it spelt out was see me. I was like, first of all, who are you? I don't remember the name, but he gave me this name, and then he said, see me. And I was like, I don't understand what you're saying. Are you saying that you want to appear to us? And he said, yes. Well, I didn't allow that. I said, no, you're not going to do that because that will freak me out. That was it. The board died. There was nothing else happening. We put it away, and the drummer and I were just kind of sitting there chilling. About 2 minutes later, the lead singer got up and he came into the kitchen, and I said, what's up? Couldn't you sleep? He said, well, I was fast asleep, and I woke up and looked over at the door, and all of a sudden this blue guy walked through the door, turned and looked at me, and then disappeared. Well, as we figured, it was right at the same time that this entity was wanting to appear to us. One thing about the Ouija board, as I said, it's not a toy. If you're not careful, you can actually attract nastiness around you, and I actually did. It took me a while to get rid of it. I also attracted some pretty cool spirits that were around me for a while. I eventually stopped doing any of that, started eliminating any kind of negativeness in my life, and was focusing on building positiveness in my life. I've got better things to do with my time. So anyway, the Ouija board was actually very addictive. It was like eating ice cream, putting it away, and then I just want to eat some more ice cream. I would think about it quite a bit. I would be drawn to it. At that point, we would actually get together to do the Ouija board. I stopped playing with those people, and I didn't buy another Ouija board. But what I did was I made one. I made it out of a cardboard box. I just cut out the cardboard box. I wrote all the stuff on there, and I took this copper wire, this little thin copper wire, and I coiled it up. I had this one little piece that was sticking up, and that was the pointer. I could actually hold my finger on that pointer, and that copper wire would spin around my finger. Eventually, I realized that no good was coming of this. I needed to stop. Anything that was addicting me that much is not good. So I brought it out and I burned it. Remember, it's cardboard. As it was burning, it had this blue flame. Now, cardboard doesn't burn blue. It burns orange. I've burned a lot of cardboard in my day. Blue means that there's some kind of chemical burning, like a blowtorch. Well, that was enough to let me know that I never needed to do that again. I only had one last experience with that negative entity. I think I'll save that story for another day. Suffice to say, got rid of them, nothing but positiveness. I actually learned through this experience with the Ouija board how to actually push them away. I'll get into that in just a little bit, how you can possibly do it yourself. But for now, let's take another sip. Okay, that was kind of a scary one. Let me tell you what I believe about the spirit world. First of all, let me start by saying the reason why I don't talk about this all the time is I don't believe that fearing is a good thing, because I know that bad things can influence you when you're afraid, and they will try to make you fearful so they can do that. There's different kinds of entities. There are the ones that I told you about before that are basically people. For one reason or another, they just kind of hanging around. A lot of times there's unfinished work, they're attached to something, they just don't want to move on, or loved ones can not let them go because of their sadness and their bond with them. It makes them feel like they need to stay there. There's good ones, there's bad ones. Like I said before, they're just people. They're scared, they're lonely, they're confused. They can even be funny and happy. It's pretty much the same as people that you meet on the street. Then there are some nasty things out there, evil. There's all kinds of stories and things about demons and what have you, and I don't really know. Again, this is what I believe from my experience. I didn't give a whole lot of attention to that kind of thing, so I don't know. I know what they feel like, but I can't tell you where they come from or any of that kind of stuff. I just know that they're nasty, and you don't want to have anything to do with them. I do know that none of them have any power whatsoever. They exist in a reality that is below this one. It doesn't vibrate as high as this one, if you understand what I'm saying. They have absolutely no energy. They have no power. They have nothing to work with except what they borrow from living people and maybe animals. I don't know. I have experienced that they are attracted to powerful people. They're also attracted to weak people. Those are the people that they tend to manipulate. Those are the people that they possess. Sometimes there's violence involved, but they are definitely attracted to weak, scared people. There's no reason to be afraid of them because there's absolutely nothing they can do to you unless you allow it. First of all, don't get on a Ouija board. It's not a toy. It's a really, really, really scary thing. You're opening up a doorway to sit down and welcome a spirit in to have conversations with you. Just don't do it. When you have gotten too close to one of these entities, they will feed on your energy. It could make you feel weak. It can make you feel depressed. It can make you feel sad. I believe everybody is empathic at a certain level, even if you don't realize it. I don't know that for a fact. I haven't done any kind of testing or research on that. Don't really talk to too many people about it. They can make you feel angry. They can make you feel the feelings that they are feeling. So here's some tips that I discovered on how to protect yourself if you get in that kind of situation. I know this is kind of turned from a scary to a self-help ghost weird vibe thing, but let's go with it. First off, like I said, don't seek them out. There's no reason for us to be communicating with the spirit world. I'll leave that up to you if you want to or not. I'm not saying you're a bad person or a weak person if you do. I just would highly, highly suggest that you just don't seek them out. Also remember, if you get one of those nasty things, they're going to try to convince you that they're this all-powerful, scary, beastie, they're going to take dominion over you. They're not. They're pathetic. They have absolutely no power. You are so much more powerful than them, like it would be you to an amoeba. So you just kind of treat them like that. You don't call them by name. You don't try to get to know them. You don't even acknowledge that they're there. They mean nothing. They're powerless. If I start getting afraid, I just remind myself, this is something made up in my head. This comes from all the scary movies and things and ghost stories and campfire stories that I heard. It's not based in any kind of reality that I've experienced. When I was exercising these things, it was pretty much like, you're gone. There's no question about it. You're gone. They would try to entice me into a fight or a battle, but it's like, what's the point? I know I can win, so you're absolutely no threat to me whatsoever. I told you I was going to tell you how I actually exercise them. You can try this. It's the same way that I silence that critical voice, and it actually makes me feel powerful. It stops the fear for a little bit of time, a few seconds, maybe a minute or so. It's kind of like a shot in the arm, but then you need to fill that space with something positive. So if you get afraid, or if you happen to be in a situation where something weird happens, then this is what I do. I'm going to try to explain it. I hope that I do a good job. Okay, so imagine that you are someplace and that this wild animal is coming to attack you. Now, you know that you're a lot stronger than that animal and that you can beat them with no problem. So you're not afraid and you're not angry. It's just attacking you. When that animal comes up to you, just imagine that with no anger and no fear, you just ball up all of your energy and you punch him as hard as you can. Well, that's pretty much the same thing, except you're doing it on the inside. You got to imagine. You just kind of like build up that feeling, that powerful, fearless feeling. You just ball it up. It is kind of violent, but it's not anger and it's not fear-based. You just ball it up and you let it build up, you let it build up, you let it build up, and then you just send it to them like you're sending them a punch. It makes you feel pretty good. It makes you feel cleansed. Then you need to fill it in with some positive stuff. So call a friend or watch a funny program or something like that. All right, one more sip. Let's do it. Okay, this has been a long one. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next week, I'm going to be getting back to the regular coffees with Phil. Just remember, there is lots of phenomena out there. You could probably not experience all the phenomena that's out there in a lifetime. It's fascinating to me. It can also be scary. But the way I look at it, if it could hurt me, it already would. So there's nothing to fear, but it is fascinating. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Check my channel out. There's a lot of things that don't have anything to do with scariness. And maybe share this with somebody you think might get a kick out of it. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think about the things that I've been saying. Have you had any experience with the spirit world? Have you ever experienced a Ouija board? Don't forget to hit that little ringy-dingy thing so you're notified the next time I make a video. And as always, no matter what tune that life plays you, always find your groove. Happy Halloween. Thanks for hanging out. I'll talk to you later.